hand them to, and they'll be deposited. So I wanted to give the most amount of time to Catherine so that she can talk about the great work that Spartacus is doing and everything about it. So with that, I'll hand it over to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much to Dave for putting the Freedom and Liberty Coalition together and hosting us for this fundraiser. So you're here for Spartacus Legal, and Spartacus Legal is a legal defense nonprofit that is designed to help in the criminal justice system. And I'll tell you what I thought when I first began this journey. Is there really not a nonprofit already out there that is helping with the criminal justice system? And really, there's not. There is not a single nonprofit out there other than Spartacus Legal that is helping victims of the criminal justice system from the perspective of small government. So that's where we are. We are this fledgling organization that is designed to protect people's rights. So the reason I got into this is I became a public defender in Dublin, Georgia back in 2009. And I'd studied law my entire life. I thought I knew it pretty well. I'd never considered criminal law before, but I thought I understood our system of government, our system of politics, what happens in the legal system. It was hardly 2 weeks being in criminal court every day before I realized that law school had taught me nothing about the actual administration of law in our criminal justice system. And so as I went through that experience, trying cases, dealing with judges, dealing with clients, I realized there was something very deeply broken. I went into this assuming, like many of us do, that the public defender system, it's underfunded, it needs more resources, that's going to be the way we solve our justice problems. But what I saw is something that went a lot deeper than that. We have fundamental problems in our criminal justice system that are resulting in people who are completely innocent not only being accused of crimes, but even being killed or injured by the police when they've never been accused of crimes. So that's what leaves us where we are today, which is we hear about the criminal justice system every day on the news, whether it's the protests in Ferguson that started last year, or a kid bringing a clock to school and getting arrested for it, as we were just hearing about this week. People are talking about the criminal justice system, and we need a perspective that's not in government. So Spartacus Legal has 3 purposes. The first is to connect people with principal representation in criminal justice cases. One thing that I've experienced is that people who are real victims in the criminal justice system, it's really hard to find someone who can help you. I know there's a couple of lawyers in the room who will agree with me on this. It can be very challenging to find someone who can take on a criminal case. A lot of us are real estate lawyers, commercial lawyers, but criminal law, it's not something a lot of us considered. So our first task at Spartacus Legal is just to be able to connect people with principal representation, so that when your friend has a case or someone's child has a case that we need to have somewhere we can send them where they're going to be able to get help. But the principal representation isn't enough. A huge part of what we're dealing with is also in the court of public opinion. And that was one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn as a public defender. Coming from an environment of debate and law school where you're expecting everything to be fair and to hear both sides of the story and to have them both be treated equally and with respect, well, that's not what you get. You get a criminal justice system that is motivated by politics at every level. You've got individuals who are so concerned about their own career and their relationship with prosecutors and judges that they can't necessarily represent clients and individuals in the way that they need to be represented. So we have to go into the court of public opinion as well. And the third thing that Spartacus can do, besides the public opinion and the representing people in the courtroom, is public education. And that's why what Dave told us about the role of the Freedom and Liberty Coalition in small government is just so critically important. Government itself is what's causing the problem in our criminal justice system, and we need some public education on that, because otherwise the conversation is going to be dominated by the kind of people who profit off the polarization in Ferguson, who profit off of that. So those are the 3 things we're trying to do. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to since we founded Spartacus back in December of 2014, because we've got two really big successes that I'm really, really proud of. One is, back in February, we learned about the case of Andrea Winters up in Hall County. And Sharon Rayford is here. She's the one who let me know about that case. And it was really just an awful situation. A young woman was charged with felony drug charges up in Hall County, and she was before Judge Jason Deal. Now, some of y'all might be familiar with that last name. This is a gentleman who feels very politically secure. You know, his father is the governor. And what was so shocking about this case is this woman had been arraigned, brought into court for the first time, entered a not guilty plea, and in less than 5 weeks, the judge was insisting that she go to trial. She had a public defender who told her, I can't do anything to help you. If you don't take this plea for prison time, I'm just going to sit there and I won't be able to defend you. You'll probably just get more time in prison. And the judge wouldn't give her a continuance to find new counsel, wouldn't give her any options other than, you've had 5 weeks, you will either go to trial with a public defender who has already told you you're going to lose and go to prison, or you can plead guilty and go to prison. Those were her only options. So I came into the case, and this was a good moment because even though I asked for a continuance and Judge Deal did deny it, we tried the case the very next day, we picked the jury that day, and we came back with a not guilty verdict on all counts. So that was very exciting, and it was an example of the kind of energy that we need to get and persist in having in order to get some justice in the system. I mean, this was a woman who, she was charged with Xanax, methamphetamine, things that you would think a bunch of conservative folks in Hall County would just want to write off right away. But what we were able to do during that trial is draw out the way that a Department of Natural Resources officer had behaved in a really troubling and unconstitutional way. And that was the connection that the jury made. Not necessarily drugs should be legal, but that the government agents who were tasked with enforcing criminal laws had failed in their duties. And that was the connection that allowed that conservative jury to let this woman go after only an hour and a half of deliberations. So that was the first big victory we had that year for Spartacus. We were able to represent Andrea Winters completely pro bono. People in this situation are very financially vulnerable. You've been arrested, you've lost your job because of the arrest, because of the jail time. You're in a very difficult situation, and lawyers are asking you to come to them with a $15,000 retainer. It's just not realistic. So I was able to represent Andrea pro bono, and we want to be able to do more of that. The second pro bono case that Spartacus Legal took and was able to successfully defend was another drug case in Dublin, Georgia. A young man, Kenyatta Holloman, had been charged with conspiracy to traffic cocaine that was then reduced to attempt to possess cocaine. And now that can get you time in prison. That can get you 6 years in prison for that. But they were taking him to trial on that because they had conducted and they being the drug task force in Middle Georgia, had conducted a wiretapping investigation where they had been tapping the phones of people throughout Middle Georgia, and they had heard my client talking in what they considered a suspicious way. So this is state court. Spartacus Legal only operates in state court right now. We don't have any, the feds, it's a whole different level of what's going on. So this is all state court. And so he was charged with this, and they were trying to take this man away from his children. They were trying to put him in prison for this, and they had the officer, which was the same officer who got David Hooks killed. I'll move on to that one in just a second. And he really put his all into this case. They tried to say, we've got him on tape, we've got him doing this. But that was another not guilty verdict. And again, the theme was the jury really didn't like the way the officers were acting. The jury was really concerned about the disrespect for constitutional rights that was being displayed by this officer. So that was another good victory, and that was a man who went home to his family. He was back with his kids in time for Father's Day. And I got a text message from him that day saying, thank you for getting me out so that I can be with my kids. And that's the kind of moment that if Spartacus Legal was in the stage of a nonprofit that I'd like it to be, we would have had a great big post on Facebook, and you guys all could have seen a picture of that text, and we all could have shared it around and gotten that public relations bump. But unfortunately, it was just on to the next case at that point. But I did want to share those two examples of what can work, and because they really show this is the Spartacus approach to law. There's a couple of factors in that, and the first is that we're willing to go to trial. So many attorneys aren't, because it's financially impossible for it to make sense for them with some of these clients. So that's why we need to have this as a nonprofit, why we need to have people being able to contribute to other people who are in dire need. So we absolutely need, people who can respond to these financial incentives. But we also really need more lawyers. And that's one reason I'm so excited we have our intern with us here today, Spencer Fredericks. He's a 3L at John Marshall, and he's very interested in fighting against the drug war. And we need a lot more attorneys who take this perspective, because it's not just about people who want to be able to use drugs. It's not just about people who want to be able to, it's not about some sort of hedonistic thing. The drug war has been an assault on our constitutional rights. And it's really encouraging to see that we've got so many young lawyers, or on their way to being lawyers, who recognize that threat to our system and are willing to fight it. So we're training them up in how to be able to fight these. And like I said, it's being willing to go to trial, having the financial resources to be able to do that. And for that, we need this nonprofit. So we are going to need the financial resources to help people go to trial, but we're also going to need the resources to be able to help get these stories out. Because I'll tell you, there have been a lot of activities going on over the past 9 months, some in the nonprofit realm, some in the political realm, but we are up against a media machine that has a distinct interest. It's not a conspiracy theory that they're trying to thwart any one person. They're just trying to get eyeballs. But right now, the eyeballs come from polarization. The eyeballs come from making people angry at each other and finding easy targets to blame. They don't come from finding the authentic solutions that will actually help restore individual rights on a broad level. And that's what Spartacus Legal can do. So there are four basic reasons why criminal justice reform should be an issue to everyone. And I think most of the people in this room, you've all come here to support a criminal justice organization, so you're ahead of the game on that. But there really are four reasons. And the first is just a moral humanitarian one. There are people suffering out there just tremendously for no other reason than their contact with the criminal justice system. And that's something that, when you've talked to family after family who has, seen their breadwinner locked away for no reason, seen, having to apply for welfare benefits, seen people who have had their children taken away, or even worse, it's a horrific thing, and that's the kind of treatment we need to reserve for people who truly deserve it. So criminal justice reform is tremendously important from just the humanitarian and moral perspective. But the second reason is one that I know a lot of folks in this room will appreciate, and that's a constitutional reason. We're concerned about politics on a broad level. Criminal justice reform to many of us seems like just a piece of a much larger political puzzle. But constitutionally, the criminal justice system is where the greatest threat to our rights resides. As long as the government considers it criminal to simply have a substance in your pocket, then there's going to be a lot of things that are considered constitutional in order to search your property and find that substance. And so that's why it is so important, even for people who never even had an interest in anything whatsoever as illegal. You have an interest in the Fourth Amendment. You have an interest in the Second Amendment. You have an interest in protecting our constitutional freedoms, and those will always be under attack as long as the drug war is in place. The incarceration metrics certainly show that. So the third reason that we have to support criminal justice reform is political. And that's because it may not be the media, but there are some forces who want to use criminal justice reform for their own gain. And one of them is the big C communists. Now, I know I work with a lot of folks who, we disagree on some economic issues with. I've worked with folks who support different candidates than I do on economic freedom, but I'm talking about these are the big C communists. I have been to meetings with them, I have seen their plan, I have seen them at the rallies for these victims. They are very actively using this anger at the government to recruit people to the Communist Party. And this is a bad thing. I'm comfortable saying this is a bad thing to have folks who are working actively in that way. But as long as there is not a clear message from the small government side, from the side of, hey, we want everyone to be more free, then we have got to save this criminal justice reform conversation from the people who will use it to divide, from the people who will use it to give more power to government, from the people who will use it to further divide the country. And then the fourth reason is really just pragmatic and personal. This could happen to any one of us. And that's what I wanted to share the story of David Hooks, which I know a lot of you are familiar with, but as the 1-year anniversary is coming up, it's important to share. David Hooks lived in East Dublin, Georgia. No criminal history, family man, beautiful family, worked as a federal contractor, owned his own business, well known in the community. Well, he made a bad mistake. He was the victim of a burglary. And that burglary was committed by an employee of the sheriff's office, a man who was working as a confidential informant for them. And as a result of this burglary, the confidential informant, he got scared. He was like, I'm going to get caught. So he said, well, those people I burglarized, they had methamphetamine. So on the word of a thief, an admitted thief, and nothing else, one of the sheriff's deputies goes and gets a search warrant. Not only gets a search warrant, but decides to serve it at 11 o'clock at night. And remember, we're talking about a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. This is not a person who has been charged with a crime. They are looking for evidence of a crime. And they go to a man's house at 11 o'clock at night, the night after he has been burglarized, with a SWAT team, full on. His wife sees them in the yard, thinks the burglars are back, shouts to him. He's asleep. He wakes up, comes downstairs with his shotgun. We don't know where the shotgun was. There have been some conflicting stories. The one thing we do know, it was never pointed at an officer. We know that for sure. And he's shot dead in his own home on the word of a confidential informant. That's what the drug war looks like. It's not just something that happens to people who have made bad choices. These incidents happen to people who are doing nothing more than sitting in their own homes, being the victim of a burglary. Just look at the case that we had in DeKalb recently. Someone called 911 because of a suspicious person in a yard. DeKalb police respond with 9 units, enter a completely different house where a man is sitting with his wife and baby watching a movie, kill the dog, shoot him in the leg, and that's what he got for calling 911. So whether it's the humanitarian moral reasons, the constitutional reasons, the political reasons, or just the pragmatic reasons, if we don't want to be shot, we don't want our loved ones to be shot, we don't want anyone subjected to this kind of treatment, that's why we've got to prioritize criminal justice reform. It can't be just, another list on our, we've got education and we've got transportation, all very important things, don't get me wrong. These are critical elements of what we need to be dealing with, but until you fix the justice system, you're not going to fix the rest of it, because you will still have an out-of-control government that has the ability to just kick down somebody's door in the middle of the night, even if they haven't been charged with a crime. So that's why we have got to have a criminal justice reform organization that is focused on attacking this within the court system. Not just from the PR perspective, not just from the court perspective, but bringing both of those together with a limited government constitutional underpinning to actually be able to confront the people who are trying to violate our rights. So that's what we're working on here at Spartacus Legal. We've got multiple cases going right now. Our biggest problem really is there are just so many cases coming in. It's really hard to figure out how we can help everyone. We're still recruiting more lawyers, bringing more people in, but mostly we're changing hearts and minds. We're educating people one jury at a time, one court observer at a time. We're letting people know what's going on in the justice system, where their rights are at stake. This is critically important, especially in Georgia, because while I love Georgia, it's just a wonderful, wonderful place, Georgia's #1 in the number of people on probation. Georgia has more of its citizens under state supervision than anywhere else in the country. And that is not the kind of honor that we want to have. So the real danger, and here I'm always reluctant, I'm still a little new to this fundraising thing, so I don't know how much good news versus bad news you're supposed to talk about, but there is some really bad news coming down the pike. It's that they have realized that people care about criminal justice reform, and so they've started to put forward fake reforms. And that is just a huge threat. There have been some organizations that have come up, the Coalition for Public Safety, that have said, you know, we want to help. We want to make this situation better. And their solution is more government. Oh, we've got so many people on probation in Georgia that we can't keep track of them all. Well, let's change the law so it's easier to keep track of all the people on probation. Meanwhile, you know, we need those people standing up and screaming, actually, no, it's you have too many people on probation in the first place. And we spent a lot of time up at the legislature this spring, not in the specific context of Spartacus Legal, because of course, as a nonprofit, it can't engage in too much direct legislative activity, though it is permissible. So I did a lot of this as a private citizen. But speaking out on criminal justice at the Capitol, it's a challenge because they've always got a reason to dismiss you. You know, oh, well, you know, you don't actually know what's going on in the system. You know, oh, well, you're not involved in politics. But we're starting to build a coalition of people who they can't dismiss that way. People who actually know what's going on. But those people are still missing they're still missing having a clear picture of what's going on in the court system to take to those people in the legislature. And so that's one of the roles that Spartacus can play. Not only the principal representation, the PR component, and the court of public opinion, and the education, but these stories that come in, these cases of people, whether it's, you know, they searched my house, they never charged us with a crime, but they destroyed everything, they stole my son's piggy bank. That is a real story from Johnson County. No criminal charges were ever filed, so there wasn't even anything to defend against. Whether it's a case like that or a case like David Hook's, we need to know about these cases. And so we can act as a clearinghouse for them. When people tell us these cases, even if we can't represent them, we can still gather them up. And that way, when the legislator says, oh, well, do we know if this has ever actually happened? We can point them to where it did actually happen, where people have actually experienced this. So that's the critical infrastructure that we really need. And, you know, I need your help to do this. I've been a public defender since 2009, and so a lot of this has been just kind of an outgrowth of my work in the courtroom. And so we've been kind of, you know, limping things along. Our treasurer can let you know about that. We've just been doing as much as we can without, you know, getting the formal fundraising base in place. But we've just got so many people who want to help and come in that's not going to work for us anymore. So I need your help to build Spartacus into what it can be and what it needs to be. You know, my dad asked me this morning, you know, is this really something that the ACLU can't do, or, you know, the Southern Center for Human Rights? And believe me, that is, you know, I've got other projects going on. It would be absolutely wonderful if we had some other organization that could take on these responsibilities, but I've looked everywhere. The financial incentives are just not there in criminal cases. The political liability is too great because people are afraid of being associated with this kind of stuff. And so it's just not out there. So we've got the pieces here. We've got the people who are lawyers with the experience. We've got the people who have the political, conservative, independent credentials. And we've got a ton of wonderful people who really need our help and are willing to help us get the message out. So what I would love to do is, if anyone has any questions at all, I did bring just, you know, 2 small demonstratives. One is the kind of thing that we are dealing with from the police right now. I've joined my local Citizens Police Academy, which is something that I recommend for everyone, by the way. It is a great way to get a perspective on law enforcement. And what we're seeing are, they're producing documents like this. This is a coloring book for kids from the Dunwoody Police, an activity book. So it tells us things.
I'll say your friend.
Here's Mama rolling a joint.
Yes.
Call 911.
What do police officers do? Bring criminals to justice. So, yes, policemen protect us. And we want policemen to protect us, but we do have to have that voice out there that reminds people that sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not protecting us. So, and then I also wanted to share, during trials, I always give my clients a notebook so that they can, make any notes they want. And Kenyatta Holloman, the young man that I told you all about with the cocaine trial, these were his notes. He wrote down, "God loved me," 12 times. That was what he sat there doing. And this is something that it kind of, for those of us who haven't been in that courtroom, when you've got the judge in the robe and all the bailiffs and the deputies with their guns, we don't really realize just how scary that is. Like what a fundamental threat that is to someone's life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. And so I think, I look at this and it just reminds me, that these are real people out there. This is the way we will be judged as a society. We look back on all the things that America has done wrong and the things that people should have recognized, but this is what we will be judged on. And so I'm asking for y'all's help and to make sure that that judgment will be a good one so that we can represent people, get the word out, and provide education. So thank you so much.